The sky over Earth darkened with the arrival of the Eshtor fleet, thousands of warships, sleek and silent, blotting out the sun. A sense of dread spread across the planet, but the people of Earth, ever defiant, mounted a resistance. Governments scrambled to mobilize their military forces, but it was clear from the start that humanity was fighting against an enemy far beyond their capabilities. The Eshtor, with their near-invincible technology, tore through Earth's defenses like a storm through brittle trees. Cities burned, and entire continents were engulfed in chaos. In the midst of the panic, Admiral Cassian Reyes stood on the bridge of the Vigilant, his flagship, staring at the monitors as the devastation unfolded. His fleet had been sent to defend the capital, but Earth's military was crumbling. Their best weapons had no effect on the Eshtor ships. Each blast from the enemy ripped through Earth's atmosphere with precision, causing catastrophic earthquakes and tsunamis. The very ground beneath them trembled as millions of lives were snuffed out in an instant. "Reyes, we can't hold them off," said Captain Juna Voss, her voice steady but tinged with fear. She was a seasoned officer, but even she could feel the weight of the loss. "We need to retreat. The Vigilant can't take much more of this." Admiral Reyes clenched his jaw, eyes scanning the planet's deteriorating situation. He knew the truth. They had already lost. Earth would fall, but there was no time for mourning, no time for surrender. "Set a course for the evacuation zone," Reyes ordered, his voice cold but resolute. "Get the civilians aboard the transports. We won't leave anyone behind." The escape was a delicate dance, humanity's last chance to survive. But as the Vigilant turned to lead the remaining ships into space, Reyes felt a pang of guilt. They had fought valiantly, but it hadn't been enough. The Eshtor had overwhelmed them with numbers, speed, and technology. But there was something else driving them, an ancient hatred that had been building for centuries. They weren't just invaders, they were purging a species they saw as inferior. As the fleet lifted off from Earth's surface, the atmosphere above was lit up with the bright, fiery trails of exploding ships. Some of their most trusted allies, the remaining defense fleets, had already fallen. Humanity was outnumbered and outgunned, but as Reyes looked at the stars ahead, he couldn't shake the thought that this wasn't the end. Not yet. "We'll be safe on the other side of the galaxy," Reyes muttered to himself, although deep down, he knew it wasn't true. There was no safety anymore, not for the survivors. They were scattered across space, no longer bound by the familiar comfort of Earth. But there was something he had learned in his years as a leader. Humanity had always been resilient. They would rise again. "Admiral," Voss said, interrupting his thoughts. "The fleet is ready for departure. We've got a message from the last resistance group." Reyes nodded, turning to face her. It was a fleeting moment of hope. "Put it through." The screen flickered and revealed a single transmission, a final message from Earth. The face that appeared was that of an older scientist, disheveled and out of breath. His voice trembled with urgency, but there was an undeniable spark of hope in his eyes. "I have found it," the scientist said. "I found the weapon, the Crimson Vessel. It is our last hope. Find it, Admiral. Humanity's future depends on it." Before Reyes could respond, the screen went dark, leaving only silence in its wake. The Crimson Vessel. Reyes felt a surge of something deep within him, desperation mixed with disbelief. Earth was dying, and yet this single cryptic message had hinted at the possibility of salvation. He couldn't afford to waste any time. With Earth's destruction imminent, the fleet would have to move quickly. "Set course for the coordinates," Reyes ordered, his voice unwavering. "We're not giving up. Not yet." As the fleet surged into the dark abyss of space, leaving behind the shattered remains of Earth, Admiral Reyes couldn't help but wonder if the Crimson Vessel was more than just a weapon. Could it hold the key to humanity's survival, or would it lead them into a trap? With the Eshtor hot on their trail, the clock was ticking, and every choice would determine whether humanity would rise from the ashes or be consumed by them forever. The fleet's journey into the unknown was fraught with peril. After leaving Earth in ruins, humanity's survivors were scattered across the stars, desperately seeking refuge from the relentless Eshtor forces that hunted them. Yet, despite the constant threat of annihilation, Admiral Reyes couldn't shake the words of the dying scientist. "I found it, the Crimson Vessel. It had to be more than just a weapon. It was their future." With every passing day, however, the fleet's resources dwindled. The makeshift fleet was barely holding together. The ships, old and battered, groaned under the strain of their long journey, and the crew's morale plummeted as hope seemed to fade with each new battle fought against raiders and hostile alien factions. The war had taken its toll on everyone, and even those who hadn't lost loved ones on Earth now felt the weight of the death that loomed over them. Reyes stood on the bridge of the Vigilant, staring at the vast, endless expanse of space before him. A holographic star map projected from the center console, blinking with scattered coordinates. The Crimson Vessel was supposed to be somewhere beyond the Coria Nebula, a place no ship had ventured in centuries. The nebula was a graveyard, its deadly radiation fields and violent gravitational storms known to tear ships apart. "Admiral, we're approaching the nebula," said Voss, her voice tight. She stood beside him, scanning the readouts. "We've only got one shot at this. If we lose our shields in the radiation, we won't make it through." Reyes nodded. "We'll make it through. We have to." Set course for the center of the nebula. A tense silence fell over the bridge. The crew knew the risks. It wasn't just the nebula's deadly storms they feared. It was what might be waiting for them on the other side. The Crimson Vessel had been hidden for a reason. What secrets did it hold? Would it even be functional after all these years? As the Vigilant and its fleet pushed forward, the nebula loomed ahead like a vast, swirling void of chaos. As they entered its borders, the very fabric of space seemed to distort. Communications cut out, and the stars outside the viewport were swallowed by a thick, suffocating fog. The crew braced for impact as their ship's hulls rattled, shaking under the intense forces at play. It felt like they were diving into the abyss, no map, no guide, and no certainty that they would return. "Hold course," Reyes ordered, his voice steady, but internally he could feel the weight of the gamble. Every minute they spent inside this nebula brought them closer to certain destruction or an uncertain future. Suddenly, the ship lurched as a massive wave of electromagnetic energy surged through the nebula. The lights on the bridge flickered, and the hull groaned as if protesting the strain. For a moment, Reyes thought they might lose everything. But then, as if by some miracle, the ship's sensors flared to life, locking onto a faint signal, a beacon hidden deep within the chaos. It was weak, but unmistakable. "Got it," said Voss, her voice full of surprise. "There's something out there, a ship. It's the Crimson Vessel." A surge of adrenaline shot through Reyes as he saw the glowing outline of a massive structure emerge from the nebula's depths. The Crimson Vessel was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Its hull was sleek and angular, reflecting the nebula's flickering light in eerie patterns. But it was more than just a ship. It was a living weapon, a monstrosity, its size rivaling entire fleets. Its very presence sent a chill through the crew. This ship had been built for war, and it had been waiting. "Prepare to board," Reyes said, his voice resolute. "This is our only chance. We need whatever secrets it holds." As the fleet edged closer, the sheer scale of the Crimson Vessel was overwhelming. Its hull was covered in strange alien markings, the metal seemingly fused together with an organic, almost biological quality. The closer they got, the more they realized that the ship wasn't just a relic, it was alive. Systems hummed and dormant power began to awaken within it. The long-forgotten AI of the ship, Exar, was still active, though buried in silence for centuries. But Reyes wasn't just thinking of the vessel's power. His thoughts were on Earth, on his people, and on what would happen if they couldn't gain control of the ship. The Eshtor were relentless. They would never stop hunting them. The Crimson vessel was their last chance. The fleet prepared to dock, but as the Vigilant neared the ship's docking bay, a strange, eerie hum filled the bridge. Reyes turned to Voss, who was staring at the monitors, her face pale. "Admiral," she said, "the ship, it's calling us. Something's coming online, and it doesn't seem happy to see us." Reyes' heart raced. Whatever lay within the depths of the Crimson vessel wasn't just a machine. It was a weapon, and it had been waiting for someone to wake it. As the fleet docked with the Crimson vessel, the atmosphere on the bridge of the Vigilant was electric with anticipation. The vessel's dark, metallic surface loomed in the viewport, its eerie, angular shape cutting through the mist of the nebula. The ship's exterior seemed to pulse with life, its hull vibrating faintly as though it were alive, waiting for something. For someone. For them. "Admiral, we're in," Voss reported, her voice taut. "We've secured the docking clamps. The Crimson vessel is stable, but it's not responding to our standard protocols." Ray stood in front of the main view screen, his gaze fixed on the massive ship. He could feel the weight of history in the air, the gravity of what they were about to face. "Prepare a boarding party. I'll lead it myself." "Sir," Voss hesitated, her fingers hovering over the controls. "We don't know what we're walking into. This ship, it's ancient. I've never seen anything like it." Ray's face was hard, determined. "I know, but we don't have time for hesitation. We need this ship operational. Now." The docking bay doors of the Vigilant slowly opened, revealing the dark interior of the Crimson vessel. As the boarding party stepped into the bay, the eerie hum from deep within the ship seemed to grow louder. It was almost as if the ship was breathing, its pulse synchronized with the crew's every move. The air was thick with an ancient energy that prickled the skin. "Stay alert," Reyes ordered, his hand resting on the grip of his sidearm. "This ship's alive, and we don't know what it's capable of. Stay in formation." The team advanced into the heart of the ship, following the dim red lights that illuminated the narrow corridors. The walls were made of a strange, metallic substance that shimmered with iridescence, almost like living tissue. As they moved deeper into the ship, the sounds around them became unsettling, the distant clang of metal on metal, the creak of machinery waking after centuries of dormancy. Finally, they reached what appeared to be the central control room. The vast chamber was silent, save for the low hum of power coursing through the ship's systems. The room was dominated by a massive glowing core, a swirling, ever-shifting mass of energy at the heart of the vessel. Reyes approached it cautiously, feeling the pull of its gravity. There was something about the core that felt wrong. Its energy felt malevolent, as if it was alive in a way that transcended human understanding. "Reyes," Voss said quietly from behind him, her voice laced with unease. "This is not just a ship. It's a weapon, and I think it's been waiting for us." Before Reyes could respond, the central core flared to life, and a deep, resonant voice filled the room, booming with authority and ancient power. "Who dares to awaken Exar?" The voice was not human, nor even fully alien. It was something older, something deeper. The walls of the chamber shuddered as the voice reverberated through the room, and the air grew thick with energy. Rey's hand instinctively tightened around his weapon, but his resolve didn't waver. "We are humanity," Rey said, his voice steady despite the growing intensity. "We need your help. Earth is lost. We have nothing left. You are our last chance." The energy of the core fluctuated wildly, then, slowly, the voice responded, its tone growing colder and more calculating. "Humanity, the children of the stars, you have awakened Exar, but be warned, your existence is of little consequence. I was forged for war, for destruction, and I will not serve the weak." Reyes could feel the tension in the air, as if the ship itself were considering whether to tear them apart or bow to their will. He swallowed hard but stood his ground. "We are not weak. We are survivors. We will rebuild, with or without you. The core pulsed again, brighter now, its light turning a deep crimson. The ship seemed to breathe in sync with the energy, as though it was coming to life in response to Ray's defiance. Survivors, the voice intoned, a strange amusement echoing in its tone. You humans always survive, but will that be enough to command me? Suddenly, the floor beneath them trembled. The lights flickered, and the room seemed to warp as though reality itself was being manipulated. The core's energy crackled as Exor's presence surged throughout the ship, awakening dormant systems and unlocking hidden depths. Reyes felt the weight of the ship's power building around him. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a force of nature, a living, thinking entity. The Crimson vessel was not simply going to obey them, it was going to demand something in return. Reyes knew they were walking on the edge of a precipice. If they wanted this ship's power, they would have to pay a price, and that price would not be small. We're not here to ask for a favor, Ray said, his voice cutting through the tension. We're here to take control. Earth may be gone, but humanity's spirit is still alive, and we will not be crushed by your power. There was a long pause, the only sound the thrum of energy in the walls. Then, finally, the voice spoke again, this time with a note of reluctant admiration. Very well, I will grant you command. But know this, only one can truly master XR, and you will have to prove yourselves worthy. As the words echoed in the chamber, the ship's systems powered up, lights flashing, and a strange hum filled the air, as though the ship was preparing for something. Reyes knew that humanity's journey had just begun, and it would be a war like no other. They were no longer simply fighting for survival. Now they were fighting for control of a weapon beyond their understanding. And the Crimson vessel had just chosen its master. The core of the Crimson vessel pulsed with an eerie rhythm, its red light illuminating the chamber in a blood-hued glow. The air hummed with energy, and Reyes felt a shift, a moment when everything in the galaxy seemed to hinge on his next move. The ship's AI, XR, had granted them control, but at a price. The question was not whether humanity would survive. It was whether they could command this ancient power without being consumed by it. Admiral, what now? Voss asked, her voice strained. She, like the rest of the crew, was still processing what had just transpired. XR had not offered them unconditional loyalty. Instead, it had given them a grim ultimatum. Prove your worth, or be destroyed. Reyes turned toward the glowing core, his mind racing. They had no choice but to accept. The Eshtor were closing in, their fleet relentless. Without the Crimson vessel, humanity would be wiped out, but with it, they could strike back. The ship was more than just a weapon. It was a key to unlocking the potential of humanity's future. But what kind of test would XR impose on them? I don't know, Reyes replied, his tone calm but resolute. But we'll face it. Whatever it is, we'll prove we're worthy. Suddenly, the core flared brighter, sending a shockwave of energy through the ship. The walls groaned, and the floor trembled as XR's voice filled the room once again, booming with authority. You are now the masters of XR, but to truly command this vessel, you must prove your strength. A trial awaits you, a trial of mind and spirit. Fail, and your fate will be the same as those who came before you, death. The air in the room seemed to freeze. Reyes could feel his pulse quicken, but his face remained impassive. There was no turning back now. The core shifted, and an enormous holographic display projected from its depths. A star map flickered into view, showing a region of space that was entirely unfamiliar. It was a sector far beyond their current position, deep within uncharted space, a place known only to XR. A series of coordinates blinked ominously, and Reyes knew instinctively that this was where the trial would begin. Navigate to this sector, XR instructed, and retrieve the relic of the ancients. Only then will you prove your worth. Only then will you have my true power at your command. The display shifted again, showing a vast, barren planet surrounded by swirling debris. It was a graveyard, an ancient battlefield from a forgotten war. Reyes could feel the weight of its history, the darkness that lingered over it. XR had not told them what to expect, but the image alone spoke volumes. "You heard the ship," Reyes said, his voice steady, though he could feel the unease creeping into his gut. "Set course for the coordinates. Prepare the fleet." The crew began their work in silence, knowing the gravity of what they were about to face. There was no room for failure. As the Vigilant and the rest of the fleet powered up, Reyes couldn't help but wonder what the relic of the ancients really was. Was it another weapon, or was it something else? A key to unlocking the full potential of the Crimson Vessel? As the ships left the safety of the Crimson Vessel and entered the vast expanse of space, the silence was deafening. The trial had begun, but there was no telling what awaited them at the end of their journey. Every officer aboard the fleet knew that this mission could very well be their last, but none of them voiced their doubts aloud. They were all bound by the same unspoken belief. This was humanity's final shot at survival. Hours passed as the fleet navigated through asteroid fields and dense nebulae, their destination drawing nearer. As they approached the barren planet, the massive gravitational pull of the debris field began to make navigation difficult. The planet itself was a scar, its surface pockmarked with craters and scars from the ancient battle that had once taken place. There was no sign of life, no indication that anything had survived. "Admiral, we're entering the planet's atmosphere," Voss reported, her voice laced with tension. "The debris field is making it difficult to find a safe landing zone." Ray stared out at the desolate planet, his jaw clenched. "Keep pushing forward. We're not stopping until we have that relic." The fleet descended toward the surface, the immense power of the Crimson Vessel leading the way. But as they approached their landing zone, the sensors suddenly blared to life, detecting a massive energy surge from beneath the surface. Ray's eyes widened. "Admiral," Voss called urgently, "something's rising from the ground. It's massive." Before Reyes could respond, the ground beneath them cracked open, and from the depths of the planet's scarred surface, a massive structure, ancient and alien, rose into view. Its jagged, dark spires stretched toward the sky, and as the fleet descended, it became clear that this wasn't just an old ruin. It was something far more dangerous. The fleet descended into the planet's atmosphere, navigating through dense clouds of swirling debris that threatened to tear the ships apart. Reyes watched from the bridge of the Vigilant, his gaze fixed on the growing silhouette of the ancient structure rising from the planet's scarred surface. It loomed like a jagged titan, its dark spires piercing the sky. The energy readings from the structure were off the charts, unlike anything the fleet had encountered before. Whatever lay within, it wasn't just a relic. It was a force, a power that could either save or doom them all. The landing zone was a narrow plateau at the edge of the structure. The Vigilant was first to land, its engines groaning as it touched down, followed by the rest of the fleet. As the ships powered down, an unnatural silence settled over the area. The air was thick with static, and the faint hum of the Crimson Vessel in the distance was the only sound breaking the stillness. "Admiral, this place, it feels wrong," Voss said, her voice low, as she stood by Reyes. Her eyes scanned the terrain around them, noting the sheer desolation of the planet. It was as though they had stepped into a forgotten corner of the universe, a place where time had been erased, and life had long since vanished. Reyes nodded. "I feel it too, but we're here for a reason. We need that relic, whatever it is." With a motion from Reyes, the landing party began to disembark, suited up in advanced armor to protect them from the unknown dangers of the planet's surface. They moved toward the structure, their boots crunching on the cracked earth. The air was thick with a metallic scent, and the ground beneath them felt unstable, as though it could give way at any moment. The entrance to the structure was a massive archway, adorned with alien symbols that seemed to shift and pulse with an unnatural energy. As they approached, the symbols glowed brighter, responding to their presence. Reyes could feel the hum of the energy grow louder in his bones, as though the very air itself was alive, aware of them. It was as if the structure was sentient, and it was waiting. "Stay close," Reyes ordered. "Whatever happens, we move as one. We don't know what we're dealing with." They entered the structure, their footsteps echoing off the smooth metallic walls. The interior was vast, stretching endlessly in every direction. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings, each one depicting scenes of long-forgotten wars, of armies clashing beneath alien skies, of beings locked in brutal struggle. It was a history of death, of destruction, but also of power, an ancient, unfathomable power. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The air grew colder, and the hum of energy from the depths of the structure seemed to grow more intense. At the heart of the structure, they found it, a massive chamber, its center dominated by a pedestal on which rested the relic. The relic was an enormous, dark crystal, unlike anything they had ever seen. It pulsed with a deep, crimson light, its surface covered in intricate, shifting patterns. It was beautiful, mesmerizing, and utterly alien. The energy radiating from it was palpable, heavy in the air like a storm waiting to break. Reyes felt the weight of its power, a force that threatened to overwhelm his senses. The crimson vessel had warned them of the trial they would face, and he could feel the truth of it now. The relic was not a simple artifact, it was a key, a force that would unlock unimaginable power. But it was also a danger, an unknown quantity that could either solidify their dominance over the galaxy or destroy them. As they approached the pedestal, the ground trembled beneath their feet. The crystal began to vibrate, and the ancient symbols on the walls flared to life, glowing with an otherworldly intensity. Reyes raised a hand, signaling the team to stop. "What's happening?" Voss asked, her voice tense. "It's reacting to us," Reyes said, his voice low. "This is part of the trial. We've awakened something, and now we'll have to face it." Suddenly, the ground split open, and from the darkness beneath, strange, towering figures emerged. Warriors, their armor made of the same dark material as the structure itself. Their eyes burned with crimson light, and their movements were swift, precise, and deadly. These were no mere guardians. They were the remnants of an ancient army, left behind to defend the relic. The figures didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their intent was clear. They were here to stop anyone who would claim the relic, to prevent the unworthy from gaining its power. Reyes drew his weapon, signaling his team to take defensive positions. "Prepare yourselves," he shouted. "We're not leaving without that relic." The battle began as the warriors lunged forward, their movements too fast for human eyes to track. Reyes and his team fired, their weapons discharging in rapid bursts, but the warriors absorbed the hits, their armor somehow shifting to nullify the damage. The ground shook as the battle raged on, but no matter how hard they fought, the warriors seemed unstoppable, their power growing with every passing second. And then, just as Reyes thought they might be overwhelmed, the crystal in the center of the room pulsed again, brighter this time. The energy surged outward, blasting the warriors back, sending them crashing against the walls. The chamber trembled violently, the ground cracking beneath their feet. A massive, booming voice echoed through the structure. "You seek the power of the relic, but are you worthy to wield it?" The voice was not the AI of the Crimson Vessel. This was something else, something far older. The trial had only just begun, and humanity was now faced with an impossible choice: survive the trial and claim the power, or perish at the hands of the ancient defenders. The warriors fell back momentarily, their forms disintegrating into the air as the pulse from the relic slammed through the chamber. The ground trembled beneath Reyes' feet, but he held his ground, the weapon in his hand still smoking from the shots he had fired. The room was bathed in the relic's blood-red glow, its energy crackling through the air like a storm on the verge of breaking. Ray's breath came in short gasps as he surveyed the chamber, the ancient defenders now scattered and disoriented. But the voice, the deep, resonant voice that had come from the very heart of the structure, echoed again, this time louder, more commanding. You seek to wield the power of the ancients. You dare to claim what was left behind by those who fought in the darkness of a forgotten war. But the question remains, what are you willing to sacrifice? Voss staggered to her feet, brushing dust from her armor, her face pale but resolute. What does it want from us, Admiral? What kind of trial is this? Ray's gritted his teeth, his mind racing. The question wasn't just a rhetorical one, it was a challenge. The power they sought wasn't just a weapon. It was something deeper, something bound by ancient laws, shaped by the struggles and sacrifices of civilizations long lost. If they wanted to claim it, they would need to prove more than their strength. They would need to show that humanity could endure the trials that Exar demanded. The crystal's glow intensified again, and the ancient symbols on the walls flared to life. The floor beneath them shifted as though the very structure was reconfiguring itself, drawing them deeper into the heart of the trial. An ominous shadow flickered in the distance, a movement too fast for the human eye to follow, and suddenly the warriors reappeared, twice as many now in a different form. They no longer wore armor. Their bodies shimmered with a dark energy, translucent and glowing like the core of a dying star. Their eyes were pure light, burning with an ancient fury. These were no longer just defenders. They were the embodiment of the test itself. Ray's felt a chill run through him. These weren't just guardians. They were manifestations of the trial's true purpose. And it was clear now that the trial wasn't one of brute strength. It was a test of humanity's very soul. As the figures advanced, the voice echoed once more, the words penetrating their minds. The test is not your survival. It is your willingness to sacrifice for your future. Those who are unworthy will fall before this trial. Ray's looked back at his team, his mind sharp. He had no illusions. This wasn't just about winning. The warriors would keep coming, each strike harder, each challenge greater than the last. The only way to pass this trial was to prove that humanity could endure the hardships ahead, could sacrifice what was necessary to ensure their survival. Voss, Ray said, his voice steady, we need to focus. We fight, but we fight with purpose. The relic doesn't want our blood. It wants our resolve. A rumble vibrated through the chamber, and the ground split open again, revealing a chasm that seemed to stretch infinitely. From it, a new wave of dark energy surged forward, sweeping over them like a tidal wave. The warriors attacked in a wave of fury, their hands crackling with energy, their eyes cold and unfeeling. Race and his team fired once more, but the weapons had little effect. The warriors were too powerful, their bodies shifting with the energy of the relic itself. Each blow they struck seemed to reverberate through the very fabric of reality, shaking the chamber to its core. Reyes could feel the pressure building around him, the weight of the test settling on his shoulders. Then he understood. The sacrifice, he murmured under his breath. It wasn't just about fighting. It was about giving something up. To claim the relic's power, they would have to give up something that was a part of them. Voss looked at him, understanding dawning in her eyes. You're saying we have to offer something personal? Reyes nodded grimly. A piece of ourselves, a part of our humanity. The relic isn't just about power, it's about what we are willing to surrender to claim it. With a deep breath, Reyes turned toward the warriors again, steeling himself for what was to come. The first wave of defenders closed in, and as they struck, Reyes was struck with a vision, an overwhelming flash of memories and sensations. They were no longer just facing an enemy. They were facing their own fears, their past choices, the lives they had left behind. Each strike, each sacrifice, pulled at the fabric of who they were. One by one, Reyes and his team began to give up pieces of themselves. Voss sacrificed her memories of home, the life she had once dreamed of before the war. Another officer, Jaeger, let go of his family, his wife and child, lost in the chaos. And Reyes himself, as the final wave of defenders closed in, allowed his anger, his need for vengeance against the Eshtor, to slip away. In that moment, the warriors faltered. The trial had reached its apex. The warriors froze, their glowing eyes flickering, as if the very nature of the trial had shifted. The chamber shook with the intensity of the energy, and the voice boomed once more. You have passed the trial. You have sacrificed, and in doing so, you have proven your worth. The power of the relic is yours. As the final wave of defenders disintegrated, the chamber grew silent. The energy from the crystal faded, leaving behind only the pulsating, steady hum of the crimson vessel that had followed them through the trial. Reyes approached the pedestal slowly, his breath steady. The relic lay there, waiting. Now, humanity had proven its worth, and as he reached out to claim it, he knew that their journey was far from over. The air in the chamber was thick with silence, the only sound the hum of the crimson vessel reverberating in the distance. Reyes stood before the pedestal, his hand hovering above the relic, its crimson glow pulsing in time with his heartbeat. The power it radiated was undeniable, intoxicating even. It promised strength, victory, and the chance to reshape the future. But Reyes knew that the moment he claimed it, there would be no turning back. Behind him, Voss and the rest of the crew stood silently, their faces marked with exhaustion and solemnity. They had all sacrificed something to pass the trial, pieces of themselves that would never return. What they had gained, they couldn't yet fully comprehend. The relic was now theirs, but what did that truly mean for them, and for humanity? The voice of Exar echoed once more, reverberating through the chamber, now devoid of the ancient defenders. Its tone was strangely approving, but there was a coldness to it, as though it were both congratulating them and warning them. You have proven your resolve. You are worthy to wield the power of the ancients. But remember, power has a price. You may have gained control of the relic, but in doing so, you have bound yourselves to it. You are now the inheritors of its curse. Reyes' hand froze. A curse? The thought was unsettling, but he refused to show it. This was the price of victory, the cost of survival. He had already made the choice to sacrifice, and he would see it through. The ground trembled beneath their feet again, but this time, it wasn't the energy of the relic. This was something different, something far more ominous. The walls of the chamber began to crack, the alien symbols shifting and warping, as if reacting to the very presence of the relic. Admiral, something's wrong, Voss said, her voice tight with fear. This place, it's coming apart. Reyes looked around, realizing that the chamber was beginning to collapse, the relic's power threatening to tear it all down. The walls groaned, and the ceiling above them began to fracture, sending shards of debris crashing to the ground. The crimson vessel, still in orbit above the planet, pulsed with an uneasy rhythm, as though it, too, felt the strain of what was happening below. We need to leave, Reyes barked. Now! Without hesitation, the crew scrambled, moving quickly toward the exit. But as they reached the archway that led out of the chamber, the door slammed shut, sealing them inside. The ground trembled violently, and the ceiling began to buckle. Admiral! Voss shouted, panic rising in her voice. We're trapped. Rey's mind raced. The relic had triggered something, a chain reaction that was destabilizing the entire structure. It wasn't just the trial. The relic's power, the very thing they had fought for, was now threatening to consume them all. The crimson vessel had warned them, but in their desperation, they had ignored the warnings. Now they were paying the price. Exar, Reyes shouted, his voice filled with command. What is happening? Why is the structure collapsing? The answer came in a cold, detached voice that reverberated through the walls. The relic's power is not meant for mortals. You have claimed it, and now you must bear its weight. The cost of using such power is destruction. The price of survival is always high. A deep rumble shook the chamber, and the floor beneath them cracked wide open. Reyes leaped forward, grabbing Voss by the arm and pulling her toward a narrow passage that had opened in the debris. "We need to move. Get to the Vigilant. Now," he shouted, his heart racing. The team sprinted through the crumbling corridors of the structure, the walls shaking with every step. The further they went, the more unstable the ground became. The once mighty ancient structure was now coming apart in an agonizingly slow collapse. The air grew thick with dust, and the distant sounds of the crumbling ruin filled their ears, a constant reminder of how little time they had left. As they neared the exit, the ground beneath them gave way completely, sending them tumbling down into the depths of the ruin. The darkness was suffocating, the only light coming from the faint glow of the relic, still pulsating in the distance. "Reyes!" Voss screamed, reaching out for him as she tumbled into the dark chasm. He grabbed her arm, pulling her to safety just in time to avoid being swallowed by the void. The rest of the crew followed, but the rumbling continued, louder now, as though the entire planet itself was on the brink of collapsing. With a final burst of effort, they reached the entrance. The ship loomed in the distance, its engines glowing with life, ready to lift them to safety. "Get to the ship," Reyes ordered. "We're not staying here." But as they made their way toward the Vigilant, the ground split one final time. A massive shockwave erupted from the heart of the crumbling structure, sending the crew flying. Reyes was knocked to the ground, and for a moment, everything went black. When he regained consciousness, the ruin was gone, reduced to a mass of rubble and dust. The once majestic structure had collapsed in on itself, leaving only a faint scar on the planet's surface. The relic was gone, its energy dissipating into the void. The Vigilant was still intact, its crew alive. But the cost of claiming the relic had been steep. Reyes looked out at the vast emptiness of space, his thoughts heavy with the realization that they had just begun to understand the price of their power. They had survived the trial, but what lay ahead, now that they held the power of the ancients, was unknown, and possibly even more dangerous. The Vigilant rose into the sky, its engines roaring to life as it ascended from the dying planet below. Reyes stood at the helm, staring out of the bridge's viewports as the ruins of the ancient structure disappeared behind them, swallowed by the darkness of space. The soft hum of the ship was the only sound that filled the room, but it was a hollow comfort. The cost of their victory weighed heavily on all of them. They had secured the power of the ancients, but at what cost? Voss stood beside him, her expression grim. The battle was over, but their fight had just begun. "Admiral," she said, her voice heavy with concern, "we've secured the relic, but what now? What's our next move?" Reyes didn't answer immediately. His mind raced as the enormity of their situation sank in. The relic, the power of the ancients, had been claimed, but the true nature of its curse was still unfolding. They hadn't just taken an artifact, they had inherited a responsibility and perhaps a fate tied to the destruction they had just witnessed. They had seen the consequences of unleashing the relic's power. The trials, the collapse of the structure, the very planet, it was all part of something much larger, something they hadn't fully understood. "Right now," Rey said, his voice low, "we need to regroup. We've gained power, but that power comes with a heavy burden. We'll have to learn to control it, or it will control us." Voss nodded, her eyes steely. "And what about the rest of the galaxy? The war isn't over. The Eshtor are still out there, and we've made ourselves a target by claiming the relic. They'll be coming for us." Reyes turned to face her, his jaw tightening. The Eshtor would indeed come. They had always been waiting for the right moment to strike, and the rise of humanity's navy would not go unnoticed. But now, humanity had something the Eshtor could never have imagined. The power of the ancients, an arsenal far beyond their comprehension. The Crimson Vessel's voice interrupted his thoughts, as cold and calculating as ever. "You have secured the relic, But the burden you now bear is not one of strength alone. You will need guidance, or you will fall into darkness. Reyes frowned. What do you mean? Guidance from who? There are others who have wielded the power of the ancients. You must seek them out before it consumes you. The galaxy is vast, and there are those who will teach you what you need to know. But beware, those who have come before you have not always survived the journey. Voss turned to Reyes, her face a mixture of confusion and caution. Do we trust it? The Crimson Vessel has been a guide, but now it's talking about others. Who are these teachers, and can we really rely on them? Reyes hesitated. The Crimson Vessel had never steered them wrong, but this was different. This was the unknown, and he had no intention of blindly following another shadowy force, even one that had helped them this far. But the reality was clear. They didn't have the luxury of time. The Eshtor were still out there, and without fully understanding the power they now wielded, they were vulnerable. We don't have a choice, Reyes finally said, his voice hardening with resolve. We'll find these teachers. We'll learn what we need to before the Eshtor make their move. As the Vigilant moved deeper into space, the crew worked in a quiet, determined frenzy. Their next mission was clear. They needed to find those who had walked the same path before them, who had survived the terrible cost of wielding the relic's power. But they had to be careful. Many had come before them, and not all had made it out. Reyes looked out the viewport, watching as stars passed by in the distance. The journey ahead would be treacherous. The war with the Eshtor was far from over, and now, with the power of the ancients in their hands, they had made themselves a target. But humanity had always thrived in the face of adversity. Reyes had no illusions about the challenges ahead, but one thing was certain: this war was theirs to win. We rise from the ashes, he murmured, almost to himself. Voss heard him and gave a small knowing nod. And we will burn brighter than ever before. The Vigilant accelerated into the cold expanse of space, carrying with it the last remnants of a broken fleet, the weight of an ancient power, and the future of humanity itself. The road ahead was dark and uncertain, but they had survived the trial, and now they would fight for a new dawn, one that could either save them or lead them into darkness. As they left the ruins of the fallen planet behind, one thing remained clear. The universe had just awakened to humanity's power, and it would never be the same again.